The pre-dawn chill of Willow Creek Wildlife Sanctuary always held a particular bite, but tonight it felt like a clawed hand gripping Alara Vance's chest. Her sturdy boots crunched on the gravel path as she navigated the familiar route to the big cat enclosures, the beam of her flashlight cutting a narrow swathe through the oppressive darkness. Her practical khaki uniform, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a uniform for a battlefield. A vague, unsettling hum had been thrumming beneath her skin for days, an animal instinct she'd learned to trust over a decade of caring for the sanctuary's most vulnerable. Tonight, that hum exploded into a blaring siren as she approached the lion pride's habitat. The usual growls and rumbling purrs, even muted by sleep, were absent. A heavy silence hung in the air, thick and unnatural. Her heart pounded, a primal drum against her ribs. Inside the sprawling enclosure, the massive, tawny form of Sarah B., the pride's matriarch, lay slumped by the far rock face, not in a graceful, sleeping pose, but collapsed, her breathing shallow and ragged. Alara's flashlight beam swept frantically, past Sarabi's listless form, past the other two adults who seemed unusually subdued, until it found them, a tiny huddle of fur, barely visible amidst the sparse dry grass. 3 cubs, newborns no more than a day or two old, abandoned. A gasp escaped Alara's lips, a sound torn from her gut. Sarabi, notoriously fierce and protective, would never abandon her young. The mother's eyes, when Alara dared to approach closer, were clouded, devoid of their usual spark. Her body was cool to the touch, and her movements were sluggish, almost drugged. This wasn't merely neglect, it was an illness, a profound, debilitating force at play. With trembling hands, Alara carefully scooped up the first cub. It was impossibly small, a bundle of quivering vulnerability, its tiny nose twitching for a scent that wasn't hers. The second, then the third. They were faint, their breaths shallow. She rushed them to the sanctuary's emergency clinic, her mind a maelstrom of fear and disbelief. Dr. Silas Thorne, sharp and meticulous even at this ungodly hour, met her at the clinic entrance. His usual stoicism was fractured by a flicker of genuine concern as Alara laid the 3 fragile forms onto the sterile examination table. "Sarabi's cubs?" he asked, his voice low, his analytical spectacles reflecting the harsh clinic lights. He moved with practiced efficiency, his hands gentle as he prepared for examination. Alara nodded, her voice tight. "And Sarabi, she's not herself, Silas. Something's very wrong. She abandoned them." Silas meticulously ran a series of rapid diagnostic tests. A portable ultrasound revealed no obvious internal trauma. Blood samples were drawn, microscopic checks performed. Alara watched, her keen blue eyes never leaving the cubs, her worry deepening with every passing second. Then Silas paused, his brow furrowing as he stared at the tablet displaying the preliminary results. "Faint biomarkers," he murmured, more to himself than to Alara, his voice laced with an unfamiliar tension. "Hardly register, but they're there. Elevated stress hormones, a mild but unusual metabolic imbalance, and something else, a unique protein signature I can't immediately identify. It's almost as if they're struggling against something they shouldn't even be exposed to at this age." He looked up, his gaze meeting Alara's, and for the first time she saw not just concern, but a dawning shared suspicion in his eyes. "This isn't just abandonment, Alara. This is tainted. Tainted." The word echoed in Alara's mind, colder and sharper than the night air. A gut feeling, a deep moral conviction, surged through her. This wasn't something the sanctuary could handle with standard protocols. A vague, sickening sense of a hidden danger, something beyond disease, something insidious and deliberate, began to coalesce in her mind. The sanctuary, for all its good intentions, was an open system. Its labs, its isolation wards, its protocols, they were built for known threats, for accidents, for the visible. But this felt invisible, a whisper of something far more sinister. She looked at the cubs, their tiny bodies barely clinging to life, and then at Silas, his expertise invaluable but constrained by the very system they served. A radical, dangerous thought solidified into an agonizing decision. She couldn't leave them here, not with what she suspected, not with what Silas's data hinted at. It was protocol breaking, career ending, potentially life-threatening. But duty for Alara extended beyond rules to the very pulse of life itself. Her gaze hardened, a fierce compassion overriding all other fears. "Silas," she said, her voice low and resolute, "I'm taking them home." He looked at her, his initial surprise quickly giving way to understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the terrifying implications of her decision, the faint, alarming biomarkers, the profound wrongness of Sarabi's condition, her own unwavering gut feeling. They all screamed for a secrecy and control the sanctuary couldn't provide. She knew she was risking everything, her job, her safety, perhaps even her sanity, but those three tiny, trembling lives outweighed it all. She had to try. She had to protect them from whatever lurked in the shadows of Willow Creek, a danger she was convinced the sanctuary wasn't equipped for, a true, hidden danger she barely dared to name. The spare room in Alara's small, secluded cottage had been transformed into a makeshift critical care unit. An incubator, hastily borrowed from an old rehabilitation kit, hummed softly, a fragile beacon of warmth in the cool pre-dawn hours. Alara, clad in worn sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, moved like a ghost, her movements precise despite the bone-deep exhaustion gnawing at her. Dark circles bloomed under her keen blue eyes, a testament to the relentless, round-the-clock schedule she'd adopted for Kael, Lyra, and Zephyr. Kael, the largest, showed a surprising resilience, occasionally letting out a strong, albeit weak, squeak. Lyra, petite and timid, clung to the warmth, her breathing shallow. But it was Zephyr, the smallest and most fragile, whose fate hung by the thinnest thread. He barely moved, his little chest rising and falling with agonizing slowness. Every few hours, Alara would meticulously prepare formula, administer tiny doses, and check their vital signs, her hand trembling slightly with the weight of their delicate lives. The constant fear for them, combined with the gnawing suspicion about Sarabi and the perplexing biomarkers, kept her mind perpetually alert, unable to truly rest. Her calico cat, Seraphina, usually a creature of discerning indifference, had undergone a startling transformation. From the moment Alara brought the cubs home, Seraphina had been fixated, her striking amber eyes, normally surveying her domain with regal detachment, now burned with an unprecedented maternal obsession. She would sit outside the incubator, a low, persistent purr rumbling in her chest, occasionally pawing gently at the transparent plastic, her soft meows a desperate plea. Alara had tried to shoo her away, worried about contamination or stress, but Seraphina was relentless. She'd weave between Alara's legs, jump onto the bedside table, her gaze unwavering, her instinct a primal, unyielding force. Alara finally gave up trying to completely separate them, conceding to Seraphina's watchful vigil from a safe distance, unable to ignore the uncanny devotion. It was sometime before dawn when exhaustion finally claimed Alara. She'd slumped into the armchair beside the incubator, intending only a 5-minute respite, but the weight of sleepless nights dragged her down into a restless slumber. A faint clink, then a soft, insistent purring, slowly pulled her back from the abyss of sleep. Her eyes fluttered open, still heavy with fatigue, and then snapped wide. The incubator door, which she had meticulously secured, was ajar, and nestled inside a vibrant living warmth was Seraphina, curled tightly around the 3 tiny lion cubs, her body radiating heat, her soft purr now a deep, resonant hum. And, impossibly, Seraphina was nursing them. Kyle, Lyra, and even Zephyr, the little one who had been so close to slipping away, were suckling with an unexpected vigor, their small paws kneading instinctively against Seraphina's belly. Their coats, which had been dull and lifeless, seemed to hold a newfound sheen. Their cries were stronger, their movements more robust. Their vitality, just hours ago a faint flicker, was miraculously restored. Alara stared, a silent gasp caught in her throat, a profound mix of awe, bewilderment, and an overwhelming wave of relief washed over her, momentarily eclipsing the exhaustion. It was an image so utterly improbable, so deeply primal, that it defied all logic and scientific understanding. A soft knock at the door, signaling Dr. Silas Thorne's arrival for his scheduled follow-up, jolted Alara back to reality. Silas entered, his veterinarian's scrub slightly disheveled from his own demanding schedule, a tablet clutched in his hand. He took one step into the room, his eyes falling on the scene in the incubator, and stopped dead. His analytical mind, trained in precision and scientific method, struggled to reconcile what it saw. His mouth fell slightly agape, a rare display of overt amazement. "Alara, what? How?" he stammered, gesturing vaguely at Seraphina and the now thriving cubs. Alara could only shake her head, a watery smile touching her lips. I I don't know, Silas. I fell asleep. She must have opened it herself. But look at them." Silas carefully approached, his awe palpable. He observed the cubs, their lively movements, their surprisingly strong suckling. He then looked at the tablet in his hand, his brow furrowing. Their preliminary blood work, the biomarkers indicated significant systemic distress, a slow, agonizing decline. Yet now, he ran a quick, portable scan, his spectacles glinting in the soft glow of the incubator light. Their vitals are remarkably stable, stress hormones plummeting. That unique protein signature, it's still present, but it seems inert now, dormant perhaps. Their health turnaround is simply astonishing, Alara, against all odds. He looked at Ilara, his initial amazement giving way to a thoughtful, almost grim expression. But this recovery, as incredible as it is, doesn't negate the initial problem. In fact, it makes it more baffling. How could they have been so gravely ill, displaying those markers, only to rebound like this despite it? Whatever was affecting them was profound enough to trigger those responses, but also susceptible to a cat's milk or something else entirely. His words, echoing her own unspoken fears, fueled Alara's suspicion. This wasn't just a miraculous recovery, it was a deeply unsettling anomaly. The initial alarming biomarkers, the profound illness in Seraphina's inexplicable intervention, and now this rapid, almost unnatural health rebound, it all pointed not to a simple natural event, but to something far more intricate, more engineered. The true nature of their distress, she realized, was still hidden, shrouded in layers of mystery that only deepened with every new impossible revelation. 6 months had spun by with the swiftness of a predator's pounce. Kael, Lyra, and Zephyr were no longer fragile newborns, but robust, energetic 6-month-old lion cubs. Under Seraphina's utterly unprecedented and unwavering guidance, they had not just thrived, they had blossomed into creatures of astonishing complexity. Their specialized enclosure at Willow Creek, a naturalistic expanse of sun-dappled trees and rocky outcrops, now echoed with their playful growls and the rhythmic patter of their powerful paws. Dr. Eris Thorne, a sharp academic zoologist from Cornell, whose reputation for groundbreaking research was only surpassed by her vibrant intellect, watched the cubs with undisguised excitement. She gestured animatedly, her smart casual attire a stark contrast to Alara's practical uniform. "It's truly extraordinary, Alara," Eris exclaimed, her voice buzzing with intellectual curiosity. "Their hunting instincts are undeniably feline, stalking, pouncing, even the way they play-kill their enrichment toys. But their social dynamics, their communication, it's almost like a hybridized language. They purr like house cats, not just lions, and their grooming rituals are meticulous, mirroring Seraphina's fastidiousness. Indeed, Seraphina, the regal calico, sat calmly at the edge of the enclosure, a silent, unwavering sentinel. Her amber eyes, once alight with maternal desperation, now held a deep, quiet contentment as she oversaw her unusual charges. Kale, robust and boisterous, would occasionally glance toward Seraphina for approval before playfully tackling Zephyr, who, despite his small stature, was surprisingly agile. But it was Lyra who truly captivated Alara. The female, usually a more submissive role in lion prides, had emerged as the undisputed leader, a reflection of Seraphina's own independent spirit. Lyra's gaze when she watched her siblings held an unusual intelligence, a depth of understanding that was profoundly unsettling in a 6-month-old lion. She would often mimic Seraphina's contemplative stillness, observing the world with a patient, knowing air. As Alara watched the incredible tableau unfold, the powerful cubs gently interacting with the smaller Seraphina, their deference almost human-like, her initial wonder had slowly curdled into a deep, pervasive unease. Eris saw only academic marvel. Alara saw something profoundly wrong. The cubs exhibited an unusual intellectual development, a capacity for learning and adaptation that went beyond even the most intelligent big cats. But it was their selective gentleness that gnawed at her. With Seraphina, they were tender, almost delicate. With Alara, cautiously affectionate. But with anything or anyone else that entered their perceived territory without Seraphina's explicit or implicit approval, a flash of pure, primal ferocity disproportionate to their age would erupt. They were not merely tamed, they were refined, controlled. The initial alarming biomarkers, dismissed by the wider sanctuary staff as an odd, one-off anomaly that cleared up with intensive care, now screamed in Alara's mind. Silas had cautiously agreed, still troubled by the data, the rapid, almost miraculous recovery, Seraphina's inexplicable role, and now the cub's unnerving intelligence and selective aggression. None of it added up to a natural phenomenon. Driven by a growing sense of dread, Alara began to covertly review the sanctuary's historical health logs. Late into the nights, after her official duties, she burrowed through archives, cross-referencing animal illnesses with environmental reports. She focused her search on incidents near the sanctuary's perimeter, specifically on the northern border. There, shrouded by dense forest, stood the new, conspicuously quiet, corporate-owned research facility, Biogenic Solutions, which had opened barely a year before Cerebi gave birth. She found them. Not outright declarations of disaster, but subtle patterns. Unexplained bird deaths, sudden localized patches of vegetation blight, transient respiratory issues in smaller mammals that cleared up just as quickly as they appeared, all within a few kilometers of biogenics. And then the chilling common thread, traces of unusual, unidentifiable compounds in some of the water and soil samples from these affected areas, compounds that were then dismissed as industrial runoff or unsubstantiated pollutants in the official reports. It was too much to be coincidence. The suppressed incidents, the proximity to biogenics, Cerebi's mysterious illness, and the cub's initial biomarker anomaly. It clicked into place like the tumblers of a dangerous lock. The faint, unique protein signature Silas had found in the cubs. What if it wasn't a biological threat, but a signature, a marker of something engineered? The pieces of a terrifying puzzle, once scattered, were now beginning to form a horrifying image. Ilara's initial suspicion had solidified into a chilling conviction. Something was being concealed, something dangerous, and the lions, her lions, were just the tip of a much larger, darker conspiracy unfolding right on the sanctuary's doorstep. The sterile, modern conference room at Willow Creek Sanctuary felt less like a place of collaboration and more like a tribunal. The harsh overhead fluorescent lighting cast long, unflattering shadows, highlighting the tension that permeated the air. At the polished conference table, Director Anya Sharma, impeccably dressed in a sharp business suit that spoke of corporate polish rather than conservation grit, steepled her fingers, her gaze severe and unyielding as it locked onto Alara. The board is very pleased with the Seraphina protocol, Alara. Anya began, her voice smooth but edged with an undercurrent of impatience. A truly remarkable success story for Willow Creek. The cubs are thriving, a testament to your unconventional approach. However, they are 6 months old now. It's time for them to be integrated into a proper pride, to learn natural lion behaviors, away from a house cat. Ilara's jaw tightened. Anya, with all due respect, Seraphina is not just a house cat. She's been a mother to them, and their development under her has been unique. Unique, yes, Anya conceded, a hint of a tight smile touching her lips, and highly marketable for our PR. But we cannot allow sentimentality to override proper wildlife management. The plan is to transition them to the main lion habitat within the next 2 weeks. That means separation from Seraphina and from your direct, constant care. Alara pushed back from the table, her posture shifting from guarded defense to open challenge. Her practical khaki uniform, usually blending into the sanctuary background, now stood out as a defiant contrast to Anya's corporate attire. Her blue eyes, usually filled with gentle compassion for her charges, blazed with a fierce conviction. I vehemently oppose this, Anya. It's not just an emotional attachment. There are factors at play here that you are choosing to ignore. She turned to Dr. Silas Thorne, who stood slightly to the side, reviewing a scientific report on his tablet. Silas's face was visibly conflicted, his brow furrowed with concern. He knew, he'd seen the data, heard Alara's growing theories. He was caught between institutional loyalty and scientific integrity. Silas has the data, Alara pressed, Turning back to Anya, the initial biomarkers were alarming, and while their physical health has rebounded, their behavioral and cognitive development is abnormal. Their intelligence, their selective gentleness, as Dr. Eris Thorne has noted, these are not typical lion traits. We don't fully understand why they're exhibiting these traits or what the long-term implications are. Anya waved a dismissive hand. Eris herself believes it's a fascinating display of cross-species imprinting and learning, highly valuable for research, or a symptom, Alara retorted, her voice gaining strength, of something far more insidious. I've been reviewing historical health logs and environmental reports, Anya. There's a disturbing pattern of suppressed incidents near biogenics, unusual environmental markers, trace elements, unidentifiable compounds that coincide with animal distress cases, particularly lion abandonment incidents, just like Cerebe's, cases that were quickly resolved or written off. She pulled a folder from her bag, its contents bristling with highlighted reports and complex data. I'm convinced the cub's unique intelligence and adaptability aren't merely a result of Seraphina's care, but a response to an unknown environmental stressor, something they've been exposed to, something that caused Cerebe's illness and their initial decline. Conventional integration would be a catastrophic risk. We don't know what they're truly capable of or what triggers their more aggressive, less predictable responses. Anya's expression hardened. Alara, you are bordering on insubordination. You are making unsubstantiated claims, bordering on conspiracy theories based on selectively interpreted data. Biogenics is a respected research facility, a partner in various conservation initiatives. Are you accusing them of wrongdoing? I'm accusing us, Alara shot back, her voice unwavering, of blind spots, of ignoring inconvenient truths, of prioritizing public image over the genuine well-being of the animals, and perhaps even our own safety. There's an unseen danger here, Anya. Something is wrong, deeply wrong, and if we rush these cubs into a natural environment without understanding the true nature of their altered state, we could be putting them, and perhaps the entire sanctuary, at unimaginable risk. Silas cleared his throat, his voice tentative. Anya, Alara's points about the initial biomarkers and the environmental data do merit further investigation. The protein signature we found in the cubs, it's still an enigma, and the sheer number of similar abandonment cases near the biogenics perimeter is statistically anomalous. Anya's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting between Alara and Silas. The implication hung heavy in the air. Alara was risking not just her career, but Silas's as well, by forcing him to acknowledge the inconvenient truths. But Alara's moral conviction was absolute. The safety of her lions and the truth of what she suspected far outweighed any professional consequence. She would not back down, not while the shadows of an unseen danger continued to lengthen across Willow Creek. If you think the mystery ended back in the serene landscapes of Willow Creek, you're dead wrong. The whispers we heard there have roared into a full-blown conspiracy, and the danger Alara now faces is immediate, relentless, and life-threatening. This isn't just about protecting a few lions anymore. It's about exposing a global threat that could redefine nature itself. Hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to unravel the terrifying truth with us as we plunge deeper into the heart of the darkness. The vast golden savanna of the Tharbo Wildlife Reserve stretched out under a sky blazing with the South African sun. The air hummed with the symphony of the wild, a sound that should have brought Alara a sense of peace, but instead sharpened her already heightened senses. She observed from behind the reinforced glass of a heavy-duty Jeep, her rugged field attire a stark contrast to her previous uniform. Her face, now more weathered and etched with constant vigilance, held a mix of awe and a deepening, terrifying suspicion. Beside her, Dr. Zola Naledi, Tharbo's head veterinarian, watched the unfolding scene with a professional, yet undeniably bewildered expression. Kale, Lyra, and Zephyr, now magnificent 2-year-old lions, their golden coats gleaming in the late afternoon light, were interacting at a carefully monitored boundary with a wild pride. They were powerful, every inch the apex predators they were born to be, but their behavior was different. Lyra, still the leader, made soft, almost musical, chirping vocalizations, sounds directly borrowed from Seraphina. a subtle invitation, not a challenge. The wild lions, initially wary, responded with an almost uncanny understanding, their postures relaxing, their ears twitching in acknowledgement. Lyra approached, lowering her head in a gesture of deference, and then began a careful grooming ritual with one of the wild lionesses, mirroring the meticulous strokes Seraphina had taught her. And there, nestled regally between Lyra's enormous paws, was Seraphina. The small calico cat, whose bravery seemed to know no bounds, observed the wild lions with an uncanny calmness, occasionally letting out a soft purr that somehow resonated with the huge predators. It was an image of impossible harmony, a testament to the cub's unique upbringing, and a stark reminder of Alara's increasingly disturbing revelations. The transfer to Tharbo had been presented as a triumphant next step in their rehabilitation, a necessary integration into a true wild environment. But the moment Alara had stepped foot on the reserve, a familiar chill had run down her spine. The sophisticated, almost futuristic monitoring equipment, the subtle but pervasive sense of control, and the hushed professionalism of the staff felt all too reminiscent of the corporate facility back in Montana. It didn't take long for Alara to confirm her worst fears. Tharbo Wildlife Reserve, while outwardly a beacon of conservation, had deeply suspicious ties to the very same shadowy corporation, Biogenic Solutions. She found their logo discreetly placed on equipment, subtle references in internal documents, and a network of shared personnel. Dr. Naledi, while compassionate, held a professional distance that felt less about protocol and more about a guarded secret. Their integration is surprisingly smooth, Sol admitted, her voice low with a hint of awe. We've never seen anything like it. They communicate with the wild prides, not just with traditional roars, but with these subtle nuances, almost like they understand a deeper language. Alara's blue eyes darted, observing every flicker of interaction, every detail of the pristine but controlled environment. The truth began to coalesce with sickening clarity. This wasn't just a rehabilitation center. This was an observation ground, a highly controlled arena designed to study and perhaps even manipulate their uniquely adapted lions. The initial biomarkers, the miraculous recovery, the unusual intelligence and selective gentleness, these weren't just anomalies. They were evidence of an intentional design, a response to an induced stressor. Alara realized with a jolt of terror, Kyle, Lyra, and Zephyr were not just survivors of an environmental anomaly. They were subjects. They were a part of a larger global experiment, genetically manipulated or environmentally resilient apex predators, lions engineered to adapt, to survive, to perhaps even thrive in conditions that would decimate lesser creatures. And if the wild prides were accepting them, learning from them, what then? The implications were staggering, stretching far beyond the savannah, painting a terrifying picture of a corporation playing God with the very fabric of life. The whispers of Willow Creek had led her to the African crucible, and now the true, chilling scope of Biogenic's ambition was laid bare. The pre-dawn chill of the Tharbo Reserve cut through Alara's dark, practical field clothing, but it was the cold dread in her stomach that truly numbed her. The air was thick with the scent of dust and distant predators, a primal symphony that usually filled her with reverence. Tonight, it felt like a warning. She had spent the previous night in her small, isolated cabin, poring over stolen files, internal memos, and encrypted data drives. The picture that emerged was more chilling than her darkest suspicions. Biogenic Solutions, the Tharbo Wildlife Reserve, and the Apex Project, a clandestine initiative spanning continents focused on creating environmentally resilient apex predators, not through crude genetic modification, but through subtle, targeted genetic markers activated by controlled environmental exposure. The toxins she dismissed as runoff in Montana. It wasn't about surviving, it was about thriving in altered ecosystems, adapting to future environmental challenges. And Alara's lions, her Kyle, Lyra, and Zephyr, were not just subjects, they were the proof of concept. Then, in the hushed silence just before dawn, a report from the night rangers crackled over her radio, chilling her to the bone. Seraphina was gone from her secure enclosure. In a shocking display of unparalleled loyalty and intelligence, the small calico cat had somehow slipped her confines, navigating the vast, dangerous reserve to find her unique pride. And impossibly, miraculously, a wild pride had accepted her presence, their wary roars replaced by soft rumblings as Seraphina settled amongst them, an undisputed member of an impossible family. This event confirmed everything Alara had suspected about her lion's unprecedented influence and intelligence. They weren't just adapting, they were leading the adaptation, bridging species, reshaping behaviors. Her lions were not just unique, they were designed, and they were being groomed for something far more significant and far more terrifying than mere rehabilitation. The truth solidified in Alara's mind, heavy and unyielding. She clutched a small, encrypted data drive, the culmination of her clandestine investigation. This contained the proof, the hidden reports, the biometric data, the financial ties between Biogenics and Tharbo, the classified project outlines. She could not, would not, allow these magnificent creatures or any other animals to be pawns in a hidden experiment manipulated for some chilling corporate vision of a resilient future. The moral conviction that had driven her from the beginning now burned with an incandescent fury. As the first sliver of false dawn painted the sky in cold blues, Alara drove to a desolate open area of the reserve, a predetermined spot where she knew the prides often converged. A cold, low-key blue light from a distant approaching vehicle pierced the gloom, illuminating the dust. It was them, the shadowy corporate forces, security, scientists. She braced herself. Kale, Lyra, and Zephyr emerged from the deepening shadows, their powerful bodies tense, their eyes fixed on the approaching threat just out of frame. They positioned themselves protectively around Alara, a formidable wall of muscle and instinct. And perched on Lyra's broad back, fearless and defiant, was Seraphina, her amber eyes glowing with an unusual awareness, a silent sentinel embodying the extraordinary bond and defiance. Vague, menacing silhouettes of well-dressed corporate security or scientists, their faces partially obscured, became visible as the vehicle drew closer. Their intentions were unclear, but undeniably ominous. This was it, the confrontation. Alara's heart hammered, but her weathered face was set with grim determination. She was risking everything, her life, her future, to protect her unique family and to unveil the horrifying truth. The Apex project would not remain in the shadows. She would expose it no matter the cost. 2 years ago, in the cold light of a Willow Creek morning, Alara Vance, then a determined keeper, discovered 3 tiny lion cubs, whimpering and trembling, their mother having utterly abandoned them. The sanctuary's veterinarian, Dr. Silas Thorne, had grimly declared their survival hung by the thinnest thread, a profound challenge for an understaffed facility, stating they won't make it through the night without constant warmth and feeding. Who could have imagined that from such a desperate beginning, a miraculous, impossible bond would form between those fragile cubs and a calico house cat named Seraphina? This extraordinary interspecies phenomenon became a beacon of hope, but also a dark signpost pointing towards a chilling truth. What began as a simple rescue evolved into Alara's relentless pursuit of answers, fueled by the cub's unnatural resilience and unique intelligence. Her journey led her from the deceptive calm of Willow Creek to the vast plains of the Tharbo Reserve, exposing a clandestine initiative, the Apex Project. Biogenic Solutions, under the guise of conservation, was orchestrating a global experiment manipulating apex predators for an unknown sinister purpose. Alara, now standing defiantly surrounded by her formidable bioengineered lions, was ready to expose the conspiracy, risking everything to protect her family and unveil a truth so dark it could redefine the very essence of the wild. The struggle for their future, and perhaps the future of nature itself, had just begun.